Hey everyone, this time we read Super Mario Bros. 3 by Alyse Knorr. This is another book from Boss Fight Books, and I really like this one. It's pretty good, especially when I compare it to Super Mario Bros. 2. So this is really the book that I was hoping for when I read Super Mario Bros. 2, and where that one focuses a little bit more on the history of the game, this one focuses on that, but it also weaves the history of the game in a nice narrative around sort of the life experiences of Alyse and how she sort of grew up with the game and how the game impacted her in different ways. Now, the history about video games that we get, which is told through interviews and also Alyse's own research, is of course slanted towards Nintendo. It's kind of hard to write a book about a Nintendo game and not have a history that's kind of slanted towards Nintendo. I don't really mind it in this case. There are a few things where I think either the person being interviewed is wrong or some of the facts are not quite right, but that doesn't really matter, as it's more about really Alyse and her experience with the game. So a lot of this book deals with Alyse's personal experiences with Super Mario Bros. 3 and some other games as well. She does go into a few of the other games she played, but obviously this one is going to focus more on Super Mario Bros. 3. And she talks about how she got the game and spent a lot of time really bonding with her father over this game. They both played it, and Alyse tells some stories about how she would sneak downstairs and watch her father play when she was supposed to be asleep, which I thought was really kind of a cool thing, and it reminded me a little bit of how I would also sneak downstairs before I got the TV in my room, where I would sneak out early and either play computer games very early in the morning or play console games. So it's really these early parts in the book that made me kind of reminisce on my own life experiences, especially of playing video games. How it was a real social thing when you were growing up in the late 80s and early 90s. You would get your system and you'd have friends come over, or if you had that one kind of spoiled rich kid, you'd go over to his house because he always seemed to get the new system and always had the new games. That was what I was thinking about when I was reading through this first section. It's not exactly parallel to what Alyse was talking about, but that was sort of the emotion that I got from reading this thing. Then kind of a second part that the book gets into was how Alyse used Super Mario Bros. 3 and video games to bond with her younger brother. Her parents were going through a divorce, and sort of as a way to shut out what was going on, some of the bad feelings and the fighting that's going on in the house, her and her brother would go up to their room and they would play Super Mario Bros. 3. And something else kind of came out of this, where she talks about how her brother really liked watching her play. And as someone who also was forced to be player 2 a lot, I kind of fell into that same thing where I would kind of like watching other people play games, especially if I wasn't that good at them. And I'm not very good at platformers, so I kind of connected with what her brother was doing, where he would watch her play and just kind of watch her, just with ease go through this game. She talks about how she's really good at Super Mario Bros. 3 and sort of gives us a little anecdote in there as well, how she went to a party later on and one of the guys there had a copy of Super Mario Bros. 3 and an original Nintendo, and he was talking trash about how hard Bowser was at the end of the game, and Alyse jumped down there and just blew through it, and the guy was kind of in shock watching her play it. So there's just a lot of really fun stories like that in this book. So Alyse talks about the evolution of Mario throughout really Nintendo's history. At least from Donkey Kong to Mario Brothers, Super Mario 2, and also the Japanese version of Super Mario 2, and then on to Super Mario 3. This is one of the ways that she walks us through really the history of Nintendo and how Mario sort of evolved over time. She kind of glosses over some stuff, which I don't really have a huge problem with, but it's just a nice way of really wrapping the whole story up and kind of going through history in a really nice way, because you can track Nintendo's history in video games by following the evolution of Mario, so she does a really good job with that here. She also includes a few things which I think are really important. She talks about how the arcade version of Mario Brothers, which you see here, is included in Super Mario Brothers 3. That was one of the cool things that I really didn't know about at the time when I was growing up, mostly because I didn't know Mario Brothers existed when I was little. But knowing that it's in Mario Brothers 3 and that it's kind of a way to battle each other and steal power-ups, that's kind of a cool thing to mention, and I'm glad that she brought it up. This is also where she gets into some of the marketing of the different Mario games. She talks about how Nintendo had to really recover from the video game crash, and they sort of had to try to distance themselves from the idea of video games at first. It's pretty well done. She does gloss over really, Rob and everything, and kind of ignore what, our robotic operating buddy did for really moving Nintendo forward, and also kind of making it so video games are a little bit more accepted. It wasn't a huge part, but Rob did play a bit of a role in, making Nintendo really good at bringing the video game industry back. The Wizard and also Nintendo Power are mentioned here as well, and this is where she brings up interviews like the one that she did with Gail Tilden, who was head of marketing for Nintendo and also ran Nintendo Power at the time. Gail mentions that they crushed the Master System, but she doesn't really mention that they were also competing with the Atari 7800 at the time, which is kind of funny to me. To go along with the marketing and that sort of thing, she talks about the labels on video games. I did another video on video game labels earlier, and I'll link that in the description below. But she talks about how the early Nintendo games, as you can see on the left, they were known as the black box games, and they tried to include actual in-game artwork. That was something that Activision did as well, and it's something that Nintendo, after they kind of got their feet on the ground and established themselves, kind of abandoned. And we ended up with the artwork that sometimes lied to us about how good or how bad a game was going to be. She tells kind of an interesting story about trying to get an old NES to work when she was, I think, in college and at this bar, and they found an old Nintendo in the basement, and they were playing around with a few of the games. And she mentions how she had to jam her phone into the cartridge slot just to make sure the game was getting a good connection. The old Nintendos were a real pain in the ass, especially since, there's kind of a design flaw in the US model. The pins would bend in a different way, they would loosen over time and get corroded. And she also mentions blowing into the cartridge, which can actually damage your cartridges. You want to use alcohol and a cotton swab for the most part. So one nice thing about this that isn't really done or hasn't been done in a few of the books that I've read, or at least I haven't noticed it, is this one comes full circle, where we start the book with Alyse talking about how she bonded with her father over Super Mario Brothers 3. We come around to the end of the book where she's older now and she starts playing with her father again. This time not playing it on the old toaster NES, but playing it on the laptop when she got an emulator and a USB Nintendo controller. It's just a really cool way to really wrap up the end of the book, and it's really nice. I really did enjoy it. So overall, I really like this book. I think Alyse does a really great job of including her own personal stories about the game and including a fair amount of history about the game as well. It's a really nice package that she's put together for us in Super Mario Brothers 3. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up. If you enjoyed what you saw, please let me know in the comments below, and have a great day.